is the autumnal equinox, a great day for a Mistech webinar. I extend a warm hello to each of you. I want to say how much I appreciate that you have joined us today. These Mistech webinars have brought to you a great variety of topics intended to help us deal with our spiritual development and cultural age, an age of technology. Last month, we had a truly amazing conference that showed how close natural science has come to spiritual science with our theme, The Mysteries of Light. Later in August, I had a webinar with Dr. Gopi Krishna Vijaya, who discussed the ancient elements, earth, water, showing again how close spiritual and natural sciences are. Gopi has put his career on the line to organize a major conference at the end of October that intends to reveal this closeness of natural and spiritual science with a conference called The Renewal of Science. And this past July, Professor Valdemar set the question, is thinking generated by the brain? What are the implications for artificial intelligence? I must say, wow, we are very pleased with the content and quality of these 2024 webinars. Anyway, recordings of all of these, including today's, will be available on our website, myth.org. And at the risk of being accused of self-promotion, let me mention that this Friday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, yours truly will be the speaker at the Front Range Anthroposophical Cafe. My topic will be spiritual unification, as mentioned in Steiner's last address at MIC 4. Now, today's webinar, I sense, will be a perfect prelude for the coming Michaelic season, as it will address Steiner's philosophy of freedom. About this book, Steiner himself said, the book constantly looks to the reader to cooperate in thinking, and it also counts his or her soul as a result of this cooperating. Here I hear Michaelic thinking. Steiner continued, in my book, Knowledge of Higher Worlds, I have described a reliable method of gaining entry to spiritual realms, but it is one intended for general use. The one I'm about to describe today is more scientists like you and me. Experience has taught me, however, that one prerequisite for a scientist following the path of knowledge is the study of what has been presented in my philosophy of freedom. End of quote. Hence the importance that Mistech is on this book and on this work that Andreas Schmitt will present to us momentarily. The philosophy of freedom, one has implanted a seed in one's soul. We put the book aside and we go on to travel the path of contemplation and meditation. While this is going on, the thought work we did on philosophy of freedom is being transformed into something quite. What this philosophy of freedom enabled us to experience as pure thinking now becomes, it becomes more richly saturated with content. And while on the one hand, we have been making our way into greater depths of imagination on the inner path, what we have achieved in thought work and the philosophy of freedom has progressed beyond the point in our ordinary consciousness. So Andreas Schmitt is an anthroposophical physician and specialist in visceral surgery. He is the chief resident physician at the Center for Integrative Oncology at the Filter Clinic, and he is a scientific assistant at the University Hospital Tübingen. I probably butchered that name anyways, part of the medical section and involved in various lecture activities. Andreas lives in Germany. When he was 22 years old, he has worked on the philosophy of freedom. In an interview with Mistech friend Angus Hawkins, Andreas said of philosophy of freedom, "It is a very alive book, unlike others, by how it teaches the reader to do real thinking." His inspiration for the initiative, he will tell us about. Then in 2019, he drew up the outline for this course, and it commenced in February of 2020. This course intends to empower us to go through the whole book and to fully experience its contents, and even to make it practical during our challenging times. So I turn this webinar over to you, Andreas, and I will put into that interview I just mentioned with Angus. But let me just add one last thing, because one of our courses in Mystic is called Refined Breathing. And it goes like this. Pure thinking is fundamentally an exercise of pure thinking is related to expelling breath exactly as perceiving is. So, Andreas, it is with pure joy that we have you here today. And I turn this webinar over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to talk about this topic that is so important to me. And I also think for the world, because intuition to bring the future into the present, I think is really needed into the world of today. And also thank you for inviting for introducing the philosophy of freedom. It reminds me that Rudolf Steiner once said, he wrote it to a friend of him, Rosa Mayreder, and he said to her, "I'm not teaching, I'm just telling what I experienced myself." So the philosophy of freedom is not really a philosophy, but more an adventure of our thinking and of our own being, because through the philosophy of freedom, we are trained to experience our own being and to be enabled to act out of our spiritual being. And that is an adventure, even more maybe in our world today. And out of this, I developed this annual training philosophy of freedom, and where we guide people from all over the world, meanwhile, through the philosophy of freedom in this experiencing way, so that it's not something theoretical, but that we really experience it out of our heart. And so we try to connect thinking and heart to come to new ideas that will help the world. So I'm also happy that I'm not alone today, but also David Martin will join me. David Martin is professor for for pediatrics and has a chair for anthroposophic medicine, and I just gave him
and medical theory. Yes, and I am here to let you know something which Andrea has probably more difficulty telling himself because he did it. He actually used the philosophy of freedom to create a training on the philosophy of freedom. And he's doing it in a way that is engendering freedom in those who are involved, because that's what it's about, to try to do things in a way where you read from the context what is the best way to develop them and to do them more. So Andreas is originally a surgeon, And now he's enabling people all around the world to become a surgeon of their own minds and to learn to dissect and differentiate more and more in order to create the free space that is needed for newness to come towards the future and for healing. And I've had the pleasure of doing this with Andreas now for 5 years. And you discover that all these sentences from this philosophy of freedom become more and more a meditation in themselves. And so it's a path of meditations through a book that is telling the story of how someone finds the space within the free spirit can develop. And I look forward to hearing Andreas speak about this now, and then we will see each other again in a little while.
Thank you very much, David. So I have the pleasure to have this talk about intuition and how to bring the future into the present. If we look into the world of today, we are facing many crises. We have soil distinction, we have insect distinction, we have distinction of species, we have all this pollution of the world, of the sea, we have climate change, we have so many conflicts and even wars all over the world, we have propaganda, we have loss of differentiation and diversity of opinion. We see that there are monopolies of power, of finances, inequality. And with AI, we also have an increasing surveillance, monitoring of the people, manipulation, disinformation. And it's so highly developed that institutions in the USA close to the government even say, we today have a war on truth. And this war on truth, so to be the one who says what is true or not, might be even more important than physical wars in the world of today. So we are in challenging times, and we also see that in an increase of mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, and other illnesses. So there is a crisis, and there is, I think we can really say, an existential crisis in the world today. And I realize that sometimes when I talk to friends, to elderly friends who say they are happy that they are not young anymore, because then they would have to face all these challenges that may come in the future. And we can see that also when we look at young adults, because unfortunately the death cause #1 in the USA has been suicide the last year. And the rate of anxiety disorders has increased in the last 12 years from 7 to 15%. So we see that the future, the hope for the future, how the young people and also the elderly people, maybe also you, go towards the future, live in this world, is quite a challenge today. So the question, how can we rebuild future outside and also from inside, is a very important question, and in our times. And there is this big task inside this question: where does future come from? How can we create it in the world in an outer way, and also first in an inner way from inside? And how do new ideas for the future rise within ourselves? New ideas that don't come from the data of the past, from the mindset of the past, but really can bring something new into the world. And this capacity, this capability to bring new ideas into the world, to bring future, to carry future inside, we may call that intuition. So intuition means, in this sense, that we are able to carry future inside and to have a sense of the future and to act according to this sense for the future. And for me, this question of intuition is very much connected to the question of morality. So we may ask, how does humanity come into the world? How is our relation to nature, to the earth, to the animals, to the other human beings? So with the question for the future, all these questions of a new morality also arise. So, and they are very close connected to each other. So the theme of the future, the intuition, morality, how we are connected to the other beings, to nature, to animals, to other human beings, they all, for me, they come together in a common realm, and they come to something that Rudolf Steiner calls in his philosophy of freedom ethical individualism. And we will see during this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you live, how they are related to each other and what Rudolf Steiner may mean with ethical individualism. Now I want to come a little closer to what intuition could be. And the first thing, if we ask people what is intuition, and we may ask them all over the world. So I had this discussion with people from Europe, but also with people from China, because we have 8 languages in our course and we have people from all over the world. And so I discussed with people from China, what do you think, what is intuition? And the first thing they said, intuition is something like a feeling. I may have this gut feeling. And it's something like I sense what may happen or what may be the better way for me to go to this direction, to make this decision instead of another decision. So to do intuitively the right thing without really thinking rational about it. So we are not calculating something, but we are doing something out of a feeling, out of a deeper sense. And this form of intuition we may call not clairvoyance, but clair feeling. So I would like to implement this word, clair feeling. And this clair feeling is the field where we normally talk about intuition. So we are sensing something in advance, and we are then going this or another way that seems better for us because we feel it, we sense it. And this sense for the future has, for me, a little dreaming state. So we are not really clear what may happen. We don't have an exact idea, but we have this feeling. And it's a little bit like dreaming through life into the future. It has a dreaming character. And if we ask, can we develop this more? I would say yes, we can develop this form of intuition more if we come to a more balanced inner state. So if we live a more mindful life, more balanced, more meditative, more in resonance with our body, our being, our heart, then we may develop this more dreamy state of intuition more and more, that we feel more guided while we are going through our life. So this is the first aspect of intuition I want to mention, this connected to our feeling. Then there is another state of intuition that we normally don't call intuition. And that has to do with something where the future all the time is constantly developing, and that is through our actions, through our will. So with every step you are doing, you are going, with every action you are performing, you create the future. Because if you think you could go this way or another way, other people you may encounter other people, other things will happen to you. And through this, your life will go another way, another direction. And there is a very impressive story to point this out. I have a friend, Rosemary, who lives in Spain, and she told me about friends of her. They're a couple, they lived together, and one night the woman came home very late, and she put her high heels directly in front of the door of the sleeping room. And in the night, her husband wake up, he wanted to go to the bathroom, he fall over this high heels and crashed on the floor, and he crashed on his head, and he then a very big argue started in the middle of the night between those two. And in the next morning, this man had such a headache that he didn't go to work. And however, this day was the day when the World Trade Center crashed. And you may imagine it, his office has been in the World Trade Center. So because of this accident, because of his wife putting her shoes in front of the door of the sleeping room, because of him falling down, because of the argument, he didn't go to work. So he was rescued from this crash of the World Trade Center. So his life was rescued. And so, of course, there is completely unconsciousness about what may happen in the future out of these actions. And you may also experience, maybe not in this extent, that through your action, through your will, constantly future is being created, but you may have smaller incidents where you can realize that. We would not talk about intuition normally, but I want to nevertheless to point this out, that we are creating future, because intuition is about consciously creating future. And we are doing it unconsciously in a very sleepy consciousness, you could say, through our actions. And I would say, I would call this will intuition. Yeah, that is, we are sleeping for that, but it's happening all the time. And you may awake a little for it if you become clear about what is constantly not happening in your life. So think about, maybe you just think about the last day, what happened during this day. And you may think about a situation where you didn't do something at the time you expected, you were expected to do it, or you wanted to do it, and your path, the way you went through your life changed a little bit. And we always have these little changements of our life, of the way we normally do things. And if we put more consciousness to these happenings in our life, we will slowly rise our attention towards the futural aspects of our actions, of our will. And it's quite important to do that, to become more clear that we are not only this physical being here at the earth going our way, but that there is a surrounding around us, something like greater or bigger connections to what happens in the world, and somehow we live within these connections. And so we are not this lonely being going our path, but we are connected to many things that happens in the world, and we can become a little more conscious about that, about also our spiritual being, if we look at that. So the second form of intuition I call will intuition, but we are sleeping for it, but still we are creating constantly future out of it. So we have a sleepy state of intuition, then we have a dreamy state of intuition that we normally call intuition, and then the question arises, don't we have also a conscious state of intuition? That I want to name now intuitive thinking. So to awake within our thinking for the future. And that is not selbstverständlich, that is not evident so in our life. So normally we are not awake for intuition within our thinking, because our mind has very much to do with all that we have learned through our whole life. So we are constantly experiencing things, we are constantly learning things, we are educated in a certain way, we know certain things, and all this we gathered within our mind, and we have all these mental pictures in our mind, and we have all what we know, we have all our judgments, all our opinions, and all that is not connected to the future, but all that is connected to our past, to what we have become through our whole life. And so Rudolf Steiner says, in teaching the teachers, the world of teachers, he says, our will is connected to the future, our mind is connected to the past. So that's a problem, because in our will we are not conscious, in our mind we are conscious, but we are conscious about our past, about all that we have become. So it's a very important question. How can we carry future within our mind? And to do that, that is a very important, that's the path of the philosophy of freedom. It's to train thinking in a way that it can carry future, and not only future, but also be conscious, confident about the own spiritual being. And to bring now future into the mind, what do we have to do? And I want to just to mention a quote to go a little way to it, how to do it, and that is Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, you may know, he has survived the Holocaust. He is a Jewish man who has been in a concentration camp, and he survived there. And he then, after that, he was a psychologist, and he developed therapies. And he said, between a stimulus and our reaction, there is a space. And this is a space of our freedom. And while I'm entering the space, while I'm creating the space between stimulus and reaction, I'm exercising my freedom. Because now it's me who decides how I will react, and it's not my automatic reaction. And now normally we think this sentence, this quote is connected to our emotions. So if I'm getting angry, I have to build a space between my anger, between the stimulus and now my anger, in order to react differently, to exercise my freedom. But this quote is also true for our mind, for our whole mental images, for our thinking process, for our opinions, for all that we gathered through our life. So we are called to create a little space, not only between ourself and our emotion, but also between ourself and our mind, our own thinking, our own, the way we put things together in our mind, the way we look to the world, the way we build mental images about the world. So now we are called to create a space between I'm called to create a space between me and myself, the way I normally look to the world, I normally judge the world, I normally have opinions about the world. And if you try to do that, you will realize it's not so easy. It's much easier to look to your emotions in this way, because we are more identified with what we are carrying in our mind, even more than normally what we have in our emotions. And if we want to be more intuitively within our mind, we have to create the space between, I have to create the space between me and myself, my specific way to look at the world. And it's something we really have to train and it's not so easy to open the space and to have this free realm within oneself. Okay, now I will go a little slower further on and make a little pause so yet that you can exercise this within yourself to create this inner space between the normal way you think and yourself, this moment. So in the path of the philosophy of freedom, we are training this. We train not to look to the content of our thinking, but to the inner activity that lies behind the thinking. And to do that, we have to get rid of all the content we are carrying within our mind so that we really experience the spiritual activity that lies behind it. And that's very beautiful to experience. That is something that makes so happy because it creates a space of freedom within oneself that is really amazing to experience it. It's I would say it's the reason why we are doing this work with the philosophy of freedom, because me and my team, so I have different teams in different countries, and most of them working voluntarily for the project, because they experience this inner space where happiness, where bliss comes, because you sense this freedom from inside that is pretty much a freedom from oneself, from the way we have become out of our past, so that we really become beings that go into the future, that develop into the future. Yeah, and this is something that not only happens within ourselves, but that has consequences to the way we live together with other people, the way we encounter other people. Because when we're doing this and we realize that we ourselves, when I realize that I myself, what I think normally is not just the truth, but it's one way to think, I become much more tolerant to what other people are thinking, the way other people are living, the way other people are experiencing the spirit. And so I become more open to them. And naturally, my encounters will be much more closer, because now I'm much more interested in what the other person is thinking, feeling, doing, because I can create this space between me and myself, and I can let the person come closer to me, because I'm not longer identified so much with my past, with the way I'm used to think, I'm used to be, and I can see the beauty within the other person much more. And so what happened through this annual training, Philosophy of Freedom, that my encounters have been much, much, much more. And the COVID time, I started with directly in the February 2020, when COVID starts. And through the following years, there were so many encounters that it was a very beautiful time. And this is for me the magic of the philosophy of freedom, that it's not something we train only within our thinking, but it's something that enables us to live more together with other people, because we look more to the intentions and not so much to the opinions, to the personality, to the way they live in normal life, but more to the being, because we sense this being within ourselves more, because we train to create this inner space where yeah, it's hard to describe, because it's it's not filled with content. It's an open space, and that's the beauty of it. It's an open space through which new ideas, new encounters, new possibilities may arise, and also not only for the outer world, but also it's like a source within oneself. Okay, I don't see you, so I can't really react to you and respond to you. So I just have to continue my monologue. But I hope and I try to have a little feeling for the spiritual space we are all in. You could say for the etheric space, and to connect to this. So for me, this video, the Zoom is a possibility not to connect directly to you. I can't do that, but I try to connect to my inner being, to the spirit, more to the spirit, and through that also to you, so that we are in the same spiritual realm now. I hope this is happening. So I want to go a step further. So I said we are creating this inner space where we are not we create this inner space, and in this inner space, we may exercise our freedom. So if we look into the world around us, we see the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and all beings around the human beings are somehow bound to their appearance, to the way they are born, and to the way they act out of their being. And they are not free to act differently than they have to act out of their instincts or out of the way they are built. And also artificial intelligence acts like in the way the algorithms are formed and the data they have. So there is no freedom. For the freedom, you need an individuality, and you need this capacity not to be determined by your past, but to be able to make a decision for the future. And so we are exercising our freedom when we create this space where we can act differently than we have acted out of our past. And so this form of intuition that we are carrying in our intuitive thinking and our freedom, that is very closely connected to each other. And that's why the philosophy of freedom is called philosophy of freedom, or in English, philosophy of spiritual activity, and has so much to do with intuition, because intuition and freedom are so closely connected to each other. And within that, we need we train a very strong sense for our individuality, for our self, for our spiritual being. That is very important in our times, because if you discuss with a lot of scientists and neurobiologists, many of them will say, oh, our consciousness, our self, it's only an imagination, illusion of the brain function. And they don't really sense their self. They gathered a lot of thoughts. Now, sorry, I'm sorry for that I say that now for you, but they are gathering a lot of thoughts, and now that is our tendency of all of us, also from me. We are gathering thoughts, and then we identify with them, and to realize the self, we have to create this space. So also the philosophy of freedom is a training in self-experience, you could say, connected to your spiritual being. Because it's an experience, it's not a thought. So you can think about many things in the world, and many people will think different things. So we have plenty of thoughts, but to experience ourselves and our spiritual being, we have to stop all these thoughts. Because how do we know if a thought is right or no? We don't really know. We have to stop it and to go back to the source of the thought, that is our spiritual activity, where we are experiencing ourselves. And so there is this sense for the self, for the I, that is exercised also by that. And with that, there comes another theme in. I also mentioned it before, and that is morality. So where does morality come from? That's a very deep question too. We will not go so deeply into it. So I think you could say, many say, okay, morality is if you act according to the laws, according to what a certain authority says, according to the 10 rules of the Bible. And these are all outer principles of morality. And of course, it's not false to follow them. But the question is, to follow an outer principle, is that really morality? And we can even follow our conscience. But how do we know where our conscience comes from? And I'm sure you will have experienced that you may have a bad conscience for an action. And this bad conscience is not really you, but is also because of some experiences in your past, in your childhood, maybe. So even with our conscience, it's not clear that it's really our own morality. And there's a very beautiful quote from Hannah Arendt. She is Jewish and she escaped to the USA when the war in the Second World War arose. And she's a philosopher and also a journalist. And she said, I'm just quoting her, I will read it. Morality is about the individuality of one's uniqueness. The criterion of right and wrong, the answer to the question, what should I do, depends in the last instance neither on habits and customs that I share with other living people around me, nor on a comment of divine or human origin, but on what I decide with regard to myself. In other words, I cannot do certain things because I would not be able to live with myself afterwards. I repeat the last sentence. I cannot do certain things because I would not be able to live with myself afterwards. This is a very interesting quote because what Hannah Arendt is mentioning is that she also makes a difference. She differentiates between her and herself. And she says, I would not be able to live with myself afterwards if I would just follow an authority and not my inner self. So we have this inner self that we can experience more and more, out of which the good may come, out of which our freedom comes, out of which our intuition comes. And it's a question to experience this more and more. And Rudolf Steiner calls that ethical individualism, where he says really ethical actions, the real morality, doesn't come from outside. It comes from inside when I understand myself deep enough in my spiritual being. And before we go further on with this topic that also has to do with intuition and how we bring future into the world, David will guide us through a little exercise to experience more this intuitive realm. So I wish you great pleasure now with David. And he's always doing the exercises during the Philosophy of Freedom course. And I'm so happy about it because it's so amazing how he's intuitively doing these exercises.
Thank you, Andreas. It's a great pleasure to imagine you all around many places in the world. And now I invite you into an inner space within which you are invited to imagine a circle. Picture yourself a circle. Think of a circle. And if you want, now try to spin this circle around its own axis slowly. Just to exercise inner activity. The beginning of spiritual activity is inner activity. How does it work? Can you move that circle? Can you choose the direction and the speed at which it is moving? And now bring the circle to a still stand and expand it. Make the circle wider and bigger. And keep part of your energy to watch what is happening to you, watch what you observe while you're doing that. Make the circle bigger and bigger. What is happening to the feeling you have? The circle is getting bigger. And now let it get smaller again. Smaller and smaller. Very small. Very, very small. And now bring it back to a nice size in front of you. And now we are going to work towards the space of intuition. And for that, I invite you to remove from the circle anything that does not belong necessarily to it. So if the line of your circle has any color, or is black or white, you can remove that. And if the line of your circle has any thickness, you can remove that. And as a matter of fact, if your circle has any particular size, you can remove that. And if your circle is on any particular plane, you can free it from that plane. Where have we got to now? Can you still see the circle? No, and yet you know what you are thinking about. You have freed your thinking from mental pictures, but you're still in the know of what a circle is. And a person who you don't even need to have a concept of a circle. Even a small child know what circleness is like and will recognize it. And when it's drawn on the blackboard, in the times where they still had blackboards, would see and feel and will into whether the circle is being drawn well or whether it's wonky. So I invite you into this feelingness for circle that is beyond any mental picturing, that is beyond space and time, and is yet closer to what a circle is than any circle we could produce or imagine. A space out of which all circles, past and future, are born and can be recognized. I would like to invite you to just stay for a little while in this inner space of knowing what a circle is, relinquishing any specific picture of the circle. How do you know you are still with the circle? What do you observe in yourself? And now we are going to move on from the simple thought of the circle to the thought of yourself. What is your thought of yourself? And again, you are invited to free that thought from everything that is not really yourself. From the momentary situations in your life, from the thoughts that are maybe connected with yourself, from your body as it is right now, from everything of the past. It's still there, but you've made some space between yourself and it. And can you, within that self that you are starting to discover, to feel, to have an inkling about, do you feel that it has the quality of someone who you like to live with? And what do your thoughts, your feelings, your actions look like when they emanate from the self that you like to be with, the self with which and out of which you want to experience yourself from? And as humanity, we are on the journey towards this self. And to come back to Hannah Arendt, who wrote this beautiful book on the freedom to be free, and describes how 250 years ago, 1780, 1790, both in France and in America, a revolution was taking place, leading to a free America and to a France which first went through the horrors of what happened after the French Revolution. At the same time, Johannes Gottlieb Fichte, 1793, was telling his students, think of the wall, and now think of that which is thinking the wall. Revolutions started out of this space of having a feeling for your free self. And the more we exercise this, the more we will share and even gift our surroundings with freedom. And in this free space, I would like to hear again how Andreas is going to lead us towards the philosophy of freedom.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you so much about this insight, for this insight about the revolutionary power of ourself. So that it is not so revolutionary, but in resonance with the world, we will now do another step. Now, as we experience this intuitive realm, actually to experience this realm, this empty space more and more, we have the first part of the philosophy of freedom. So all that we, no, not all, but what David did with us is pretty much within the first part of the philosophy of freedom, where we stop thinking about things and we start directing our thinking capacity towards ourself, towards itself, to experience ourself in this empty space of intuitive thinking. And this is called the science of freedom, the science of freedom, because we are experiencing something essentially, we're experiencing the essence, a being, and the first being we are experiencing is the being of thinking, or our own being, and through that we are guided to experience again the being of the world. So this is the science of freedom. Of course, we are taking 3.5 months for that. And now we come to the second part of the philosophy of freedom, and that is called the reality of freedom. So how is intuition, this power of intuition, becoming real within our actions? How do we come to new actions for the world out of our intuition? And of course, to do that, we need this empty space, this free empty space, where we exercise our freedom, ourself. But now, how does any content come into this free space? With which will this intuitive space be filled? How do we really come to new ideas within this space? So this empty space is the prerequisite, you could say, where I don't let myself be led or guided by the past, by my mental pictures, my emotions, my drives, and also not by my own egoism, not from outer or inner authority, not from conscience, and not from principles. So try to do that. I invite you to try to do that. You may sit at your place, but not alone, because with you there are sitting now 110 other people, at least in the USA and North America, South America, and also Europe. So you all are sitting there together in a spiritual realm. And now think about what will happen if you don't let your actions be guided by the past, not by your egoism, by your ambition, by sympathy or antipathy, by striving for powers, by authority, not by rules, not by all this must and you should do, not by outer principles. So let's try to create this empty space. So if everything falls apart, that is normally brings us to actions. Why should we do anything? So why should we perform any actions? So let's try to experience this moment of silence where we don't act yet. And where we let fall apart everything that brings us to an action. Try to create this empty space within yourself, where you don't feel any driving force within you. If nothing is driving you from your past or your personality, why should you perform any action in the world? Isn't that a perfect state? Calm, stillness, very beautiful, relaxed, no suffering. So again, we are building a realm, a space. And now, if we think about performing an action, we may realize that this space is not only my space. I realize this space is not only my space, but the direction of this space is it's more directed to the world. And when I think now about why I should perform any action, and it's not about me, the only reason is about something else in the world. So another being. If I stop acting out of my past, out of my own being, the only reason is to act because of another being, because of an object in the world, because of something for which I want to do it. So if everything falls apart, the only reason to do something is out of the love for an object, out of the love for something else in the world. So the love to an object, the love to another human being, to nature, to an idea, to any action is what stays when everything falls apart. And maybe you want to just take a moment to try to think about that, to realize that within yourself. Maybe you think about something that is very close to your heart, where the part that the reason to act for this man or for this object is very big, where you are quite sure that it's not your past that is speaking, but where you are hingegeben, devoted to what you want to do. So if we think about intuition, if it's for the good of the world, it doesn't happen in an empty space, even if we are creating an empty space. It's not that we just create an empty space and we have plenty of ideas. It can happen, but we need a crystallization point. And this is our love for what we want to do. This crystallization point is the love for an object, for another being in the world. And if this comes together, intuition, the empty space, this really alive, awake, conscious empty space, and the love for something we want to perform in the world, then new ideas may come naturally. So it's like we created like a garden, the ground and the water and everything for a plant, and then the ideas are like the blossom that come naturally if the circumstances are created in the right way. So harvesting our being in this way means that intuition may come and ideas may come because we create the right space. And the love brings in the, how to say, the right ground for it. It's like the right ground for the ideas that may come. So Rudolf Steiner talks in The Philosophy of Freedom about intuition immersed in love. So the good, the good will appear if my intuition is immersed in love. And that's when our capacity of thinking, this wonderful human capacity, and our heart, the love that we are carrying in our being for the world, naturally, when we discover it, when this comes together. And so the philosophy of freedom is a training to really to bring that together, really to give the thoughts a heart, to develop heartful thoughts, because it connects intuition with the love we are carrying in our being. Okay, now Andrew is coming. I have to come to an end that we have time for the question. It's a beautiful end. I could say a few things more, but maybe I stop here and we can, because it's a beautiful end, and we can see if there are some questions.
So if you'd like to, there's this on the bottom of your screen, a raise hand button. You can click that, or if you prefer not to be visible or have your voice, you can put it in the Q&A and I will read your question. Best not to use the chat for this if you don't mind, because otherwise it becomes rather confusing. And there was a question earlier on. Can you compare this willed intuition and freedom of movement? You know, we learn to walk as children, as adults we can, or adolescents we can learn to dance. You know, what's the difference in willed intuition and freedom of movement, if any?
So will intuition, so what I call it, I've never heard this word before. I took the freedom to use it. What when I think about will intuition, it is that out of our actions, things are happening in the world, and the future is being built through everything we are doing in the world. So it's just happening. And this freedom of our, and this movement, this beautiful possibility that we have within our body to move in the world, that is somehow a feeling of our self that comes through our body. So it's more like the, how to say, so if you see a child that is standing up for the first time, you really have this impression of it's I, even when it's only 1 year old or 10 months, because you feel the strength of being upright. So our body with the bones and this force within us to move it gives us a very strong feeling of ourself. And that is, I think, very necessary for all the other development of our spiritual self to be free. Maybe that is an answer that goes in the right direction.
I hope so. Judith De Silva.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me? No.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Oh, you want me to say it?
Yes, ask your question.
Oh, okay. I thank you, Andreas. Your presentation is absolutely beautiful. I'm very moved, and I'm moved to want to join this Yaris training. But is it too late?
No, it's not. We are
No?
just we start in 1 week, exactly within 1 week, at the
Oh,
29th of September. So you can register. We have the cards also in an app. So if you don't get the cards yet, you can use the app. And we guide through it with weekly letters and conferences, and you will find everything on the website. If you go to philosophy, I will write it into the chat.
okay. Thank you. I think it's already there, actually.
Okay.
No, I don't think it is there. Go ahead, Andreas, and
Sorry.
put it in again if it is.
It's very easy.
Yeah. And while you're filling that out, we'll go over to Valdemar. Hello, Val.
Hi, I don't see myself. In fact, I only see the speaker, but not myself. I would like to give two contributions. First is an exercise. Suppose you have a problem. It could be a mathematical problem, it could be a social problem, any kind of problem. What do we do in general? We reason about the problem and we try to find a solution. I think an exercise of using our intuition, intuitive thinking, is to think very deeply about the problem from all sides without trying to reason about it. That means without trying to solve it, right? Try to figure out all aspects of the problem, right? And then create the empty mental space and see if maybe the solution will come from intuition and not from reasoning. Many times we cannot do that. The solution comes when we are not thinking about the problem at all, right? But that's also this is also intuition. We wake up in the morning and suddenly we have the solution to the problem, right? So try to think deeply about the problem from all sides, but not trying to solve it. A second contribution I would like to give.
One moment, Waldemar. I just want to add something to what you said, because
yes, please go ahead.
Because there might be a misunderstanding when I'm talking about the empty space, that I don't appreciate knowledge, wisdom, experience, and that's not true. I appreciate that very much, and it's very much needed to have knowledge, wisdom, experience, but we should not let the future be determined by it. So first we need knowledge, experience, as you said, then we create this empty space, and then intuition may come, as you said. And there is an author, Max Stirner, he lived in the time of Rudolf Steiner a little earlier, and he even said, our knowledge has to die to awaken within our will to create ourselves into a new future, a new being. So we need the knowledge and the experience, but then we have to create the empty space to let it go into more into the will process that intuition can come. I just wanted to add that because it's beautiful.
Thank you. When we think about a problem, just on the problem, we don't make a connection with the problem. We just think about it objectively. You understand? And then we wait for the intuition how to solve it. And the second contribution I would make is an example that have been given in my lectures, how to make our heart go up to the head. That means how can we enrich our thoughts with our heart, with our feelings. And I think I have been giving an example. Suppose somebody is suffering. It could be an animal, could be a person, and you feel a compassion about it. Compassion doesn't come from the thinking activity. Compassion comes from the heart, from the feelings. And out of this compassion, you have thoughts on how to help the person or the animal or whatever. And these thoughts have been originated in the compassion, from the compassion. I don't know if you agree with this example. Because it's not easy to give examples on how to think in such a way that the feelings are also enriching the thoughts. And I think compassion would be an example for that.
So I think that I think too that compassion is very important, and also to experience and to be able to withstand, to experience the suffering of the world. So we are connected to the pain that is within the world, and this is also that also enabled us to come to new intuitions, because it gives us a certain longing to act. Again, we have to be carefully, but
yes. Maybe in your way, we could feel the compassion very deeply and not try to think on anything. Create the empty space around the compassion, and then see what thoughts come so that we can help the other person. That would be intuition.
We have to try. Let's try and then see what will happen.
Well, thank you, Val. Okay, Andreas, I have another question here. Someone, when I try to go into empty space, I tend to fall asleep too easily. Do you have any help for such people?
So first of all, I have a very beautiful story about this. As I read The Philosophy of Freedom for the first time, it was in a student home in Tübingen, and we had a working group, and I always prepared it for the working group, and then I read it, and after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I fall asleep, and then I woke up again after another 15 minutes. I read again, I fall asleep again. So it's a really, it's somehow natural that that happens, because we are not used to hold the empty space, because it needs more. So it needs more inner strength to do it. So you can compare it. If you watch a movie, you can watch it maybe the half of the night if it's very but if you think about something, it's not so easy, and to create the empty space is even less easy. So we have to train it, and there are several possibilities to train it out of the anthroposophic schooling path. And of course, one is the philosophy of freedom. We are doing that with these 15 minutes a day. Actually, our course is based on 15 minutes a day. So to work with the thoughts of the philosophy of freedom, that the quotes that are on the cards, to work with them 15 minutes a day and really to try to concentrate to them. So through the 7 months, something will happen naturally, because everything that we are exercising will strengthen us like a muscle or like our brain. So something like that would be wonderful. Of course, the first exercise of the basic exercises of the 6 basic exercises also is going into the same direction.
Okay, I've got 2 questions that I think are somewhat related here. And this is, how many types of intuition, and do they line up with the different types of people? 2 different people asking this, but one is saying, are there 12 types of intuition? And given the other person's asking, given there's 12 different types of people, how are there different techniques for each one of those types of people? Or have you found a way to encompass all of them?
So to make it even more complicated, we not only have 12 worldviews, but for every worldview, we also have 7, how to say in English? See, we have 7 ways to live with each worldview. So we have even much more ways. 7 moods with which we can live within each worldview. And we may not only have, and we, of course, we have every individual person. So if we come to intuition, we really come to the individuality. And so now I have to think about, so I would say if you are a materialist, you will naturally live within the thoughts of materialism. So you might be identified with materialism. So a very good exercise would be to create an open space, to get connected to spiritual people who live more out of a spiritual worldview, and to try not to judge, not to have any opinions, just to listen to them without any opinions. So to create this empty space while you are listening to something that may have an opposite worldview than you. And that is a very general suggestion to deal with it, but I think very worthful. So you may become more tolerant and you will really work on your empty space.
Okay, another question. Could you describe what it would be like to join one of these groups during the first month? What is a person's commitment to that, you know, and your own personal commitment to make the course successful? Could you describe it a little bit?
You mean the annual training?
Yes.
Okay. So the whole team that is guiding through it, so it's not only me, but I have a team about maybe 15, 20 people in Germany and in every country. So we have a team in Japan and Korea and China and India and in the USA. We have Mickey and Eduardo who are helping, and Spain. And everyone who is being part of the team is also going the path. So I did, and also David went this path with the commitment for the quarter hour a day. We are doing this every year again and again. And it's beautiful because every year we are deepening it.
Right.
Because through the method, it doesn't matter if you know the philosophy of reading very well or if you have never read it. You will just, where you are stand, you will deepen the thoughts. And to make it successful, this quarter hour a day is the basic. So of course, sometimes you may fall out of it, but then you should try to go back to it where the group is at the moment, because it supports you in the will process. If there are 600 people all over the world who are doing that, it's a common space and we support each other. And my personal commitment is, of course, more, and of my team, because I'm writing a letter every week that is guiding through it, opening a spiritual space for the thoughts that are coming or that have been there. We have the Zoom conferences and we really bring it to an end. So we are totally committed to it.
So, but the 15 minutes is something I do every day, but then
Yes.
there's more to this, right? There's a group
Yes.
meeting. Could you say
Yes.
something about that?
Okay, now I understand.
Zoom?
So about every 4 weeks, so 9 times within the 7 months, we have Zoom conferences. So we have a morning conference in German time for the people in Europe and in the east of Europe. And we have an evening conference for the people in Europe and in the west of Europe, so for the North America, South America. And so we meet every 4 weeks, and there we have an impulse lecture like today, but shorter, and exercises with David. And also we meet in language rooms directly where we can discuss. And then we help to build regional groups. So we have a regional Zoom group in the USA that will meet in between the big conferences. We have regional groups that meet directly, personally, if there are enough people in one area that want to do it. And we have buddies, so everyone can be connected to another person, and they may discuss every week about the content.
So the other question with that was, do we get to hear when we join the struggles of other people, or are we sort of on our own in the study?
Yes, if you have a buddy, of course, you will hear about them and support yourself. And if you join one of the Zoom conference in the USA, for example, that is happening in between the conferences, you will also discuss it. And if also in the language rooms during the big conferences, it's also a possibility to share.
Judith De Silva, looks like, let me bring you back and ask you to unmute. So
Hello again.
Judith?
Yes, hello. You mentioned you have teams. in Europe and USA, of course. You didn't mention, but I presume we are part of Europe and that's it. You didn't mention anybody in Britain. Do you have a team in Britain, or is it that impossible?
We have some people in Britain and Ireland, so we have, but it's not like a team, but it's more like friends who are helping there to promote it. So we have Mark Reid. He also joined, maybe he's here. He joined the last cycle of the annual training, and I have seen his name, and he lives in Ireland, and he helped to promote it there, and but he isn't here anymore.
Because I'd love to promote it here in Scotland.
Yeah, and we have in Scotland Holsteins. They helped a little. I don't know if you know them. They are in a Campbell, but of course we are always very happy if people help us, because
yeah.
Just write us a message on our website. It's wonderful.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Karina.
Hello, how you going? I've got a question about the meditation that we were led through, or the circle picturing. I wasn't able to get a sense. I can get a sense of a circle, but not a picture at all in my head or my feeling. And I wondered if that is something that comes, or if for some people it's more of a sense of, I almost could feel a ball, but not get any image at all. Maybe just a slight darkening or lightening of texture in a kind of a visual inner field. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So normally we like to have sharings about this exercise. In this format, it's not possible. And there are people who are more imaginative, and for them it's very easy to have a mental picture and to do whatever they want to do with it. And then there are people that for them it's very difficult to really have this mental picture, and they maybe have more a body sensation about it, or maybe other are more strong in their thinking. So it's different how it's experienced.
Thank you.
And it's nothing wrong with it. Just people are different.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I think we've used up our 90 minutes. There may be some more questions, and if you want, you can send them to me and I will forward them to Andreas. And maybe if time permits, he might be able to answer some more questions if they still come. But Andreas, I want to thank you very much. And before we bring this to an end, I also just want to acknowledge in the United States, there was, excuse me, a gentleman by the name of George O'Neill, who used to lead study groups on the philosophy of freedom, and a gentleman named Mark Riccio, R-I-C-C-I-O, has tried to continue that work. And if anybody wants to work with Mark on philosophy of freedom, I do have an email for him. Just send me an email and I will get you in touch with Mark. He's out of, I believe, out of Hawaii. And then there's also out of Long Island, and I do this every Tuesday evening, with Neil Riley, who is on this call. I saw his name there at one point. He may be off by now, but so just more, shall we say, less worked out, low-key methods. But Andreas, this was absolutely wonderful. I thank you so much for coming on, but I also want to greatly applaud the work you're doing. It is so necessary in our time. There is no work by Steiner, as Steiner himself said, more important than this philosophy of freedom. So bravo, and I wish you all the best. So Andreas, thank you very much. And
thank you so much for the invitation. It was really great that I could be here and to talk within your Mistec I don't know if it's an institution or if it's, I don't know how you call it, but it's wonderful that you have that and that you are so open to other initiatives. It's really touching me that you invited me to talk about my initiative and also the thoughts I have made and the experiences.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And to everybody who participated, your energy was definitely felt and it's greatly appreciated. So with that, we hope to see you in our October. In October, we have somebody that you may be familiar with. He's the publisher of Anthroposophist Hans Jenny's book, Cymatics. And his name is Jeff Volk. So we hope to see you in October again. And for now, goodbye and have a wonderful week ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.